Andrew.
Recording. We are
Yes,
recording. We are live here at
we are
Parallax.
live at the Parallax headquarters in Western Europe, I would say.
Except we're not live because we're gonna put this up later somewhere. You know,
Yeah,
we'll just pretend it's live.
yeah.
Everything is fake nowadays anyway, since because of there's ChatGPT and fake
Yeah, you
art.
don't even know
I
if
say
I'm
we're
real.
live here
I,
from da da da.
I could be like a AI bot, impersonating Tom. You would never know,
Yeah, I just.
because the Tom bot also has like a bullshit generator, and
Mhm.
and so you would never know if it's me or because there's no difference.
There's no difference between you and a bot.
And the bullshit generator.
And the bullshit generator. Yeah. Well, I learned something about AI, that AIs hallucinate, and I thought that was the coolest thing I've ever heard. Because, for example, like they're basically big parrots. These AI
Yeah,
chat bots. But what happens is if they don't have enough information, they
yeah,
hallucinate. They make something up.
yeah,
So I've been kind of editing this AI generated translation, and it's very well, it reads well. There's no grammatical mistakes. It's pretty accurate. And then suddenly there's a hallucination of sorts. It's like,
yeah,
what the fuck was that? And
yeah.
it's because the AI doesn't have sufficiently high resolution information to fill in that gap in its knowledge.
You know what it is? I think it's a Sprandl.
What's
You know what a
that?
Sprandl is?
Nope.
And so a Sprandl is a term originating from architecture, which is now used in neurobiology, right? And so the
Hmm.
idea is, so imagine you have a rectangular door frame, right? So you have a
Yep.
rectangular door frame, and within the door frame, there's like an arch, in these beautiful old kind
Hmm.
of
Like an
doors.
alcove or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in the middle, between the arch and the rectangular corners, there's a space.
Ah.
And this space is called a sprandle. And the sprandle is not in biological terms, it's not a phenotype. It's not a primary characteristic of the door. It appears because there are some two overlaying structures, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's
You
like a
understand what?
glitch in the architecture or something.
Yeah, no, it's like extra information. There's a
Extra
space that
information.
where you can do like art and crafts, like to put on some flowers, or it's
Or
like you can,
gargoyles, or yeah,
yeah,
got it.
whatever. So in biology, it is used to describe some phenomena of the body. For example, the navel, you
Hmm.
know, that's a sprandle because it's not part of the primary phenomenology of the body. It appears because somebody cuts the cord and puts it in the body,
Hmm.
and so
Hmm.
so that is a sprandle. And so the other one is the chin, right? And so the chin is not a primary phenotype. It appears, historically speaking, because the teeth are getting smaller, when we developed from the apes. And so we developed a chin, but it's not so. And this is also like I'm saying this because when you talk about AIs hallucinating, that's a sprandle because it appears because of other structures. And the interesting thing is, just before you can reply to this, it is what we're doing with thinking, because there are theories that our thinking is a
Hmm.
sprandle in itself, because we are confined by biology, by sociobiology, by neurology, and our thinking is just excess information that appears in that thing between the different arches and constructions.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's very interesting to think about the gap and the excess at the same time,
Yeah,
and how necessary they are in a construction, right? Because if a construction has no gap or excess to it,
yeah,
it's going to look like a box, or like this ugly modern art that has no symmetry or has no beauty whatsoever because it has no excess. They try to fill in every gap and make it perfect, and it always becomes a monstrosity of some kind.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas the old architecture is beautiful because they knew something about, probably this spindle, about the necessity of excess, the necessity of
Pendle.
lack, the the need for something a bit off, or something a
Yeah,
bit asymmetrical, or something a bit broken, or something a bit, which gives it a dynamic quality, right?
yeah,
Again, I'm sort of obsessing with tarot cards these days, but they're always a little bit weird, right?
yeah,
Tarot cards are always a little bit weird. There's always like a missing, uh, uh, leg to a chair, or if you look in one of the pictures, the woman has 6 toes,
yeah,
or there's always something wrong, there's always
yeah,
something missing, there's always something broken, there's always a lack. So the
yeah.
spindle is important because
Sprandel.
sprandle, sorry, I
Mm.
never heard this word before, but
Yeah.
the sprandle is important because it makes the construction dynamic, and it allows movement, and whereas I think what the problem we have today almost with this ones and zeros is we're always trying to create this perfect construction of some kind, which ends up being an empty sort of shell.
Yeah, I mean, there are like websites and Twitter accounts just plainly dedicated to this, where they compare like old street lanterns or
Mm.
places where you sit, stairs and chairs, compared to those from today, where you have all these creative kind of things that bring order to chaos in these spaces that are not functional. That's
Hmm.
the point, and
Yep. Well,
it's very
ornamentation is
Oh no, yes,
necessary
exactly.
for
That's the word. Yes. Mm.
ornamentation is necessary for beauty. There's no beauty without ornamentation. I
Yeah.
think one of the things people forget, right, when people are obsessed with the nude body, or the nude female body, or whatever, or the nude male body as being something beautiful. It's not beautiful on its own. It's only beautiful in relation to something else. So the most beautiful thing is like nakedness with ornamentation, or
Yeah.
the most erotic thing. It's not just boring nudity, right? It's
Right.
nudity with a piercing, or a or even a tattoo. That's why people wear tattoos. I think they're so popular today, because you need ornamentation to bring out the quality of something. The thing on its own is 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 um, is is missing this quality.
It's weird. I think we talked about this before, but in a weird sense, I like the ornamentation on a breast, let's say, on a female breast, which means like the brassiere or whatever. It's more enticing to me than to see just the plain breast, because then it's just like a biological kind of feature. So when
Mm-hmm.
you go to the beach and see like a breast, yeah, that's just the breast. But when there's ornamentation in it on it, then
Yeah,
it
when there's
then,
something to remove,
yeah,
when there's a veil, when there's something between you and the thing, then
yeah.
then it becomes more enticing. Whereas if you saw a lot of breasts all the time on a beach, then they would just become kind of lumps.
Yeah.
But of course they're interesting because they because they're hidden behind something, and that's what's interesting is mostly what's hidden, not
Yeah.
what is apparent.
Okay, so Andrew, I was thinking, because the Sprendel theory is, it's very, I was thinking about this a lot. And then I was thinking about another thing. And it feeds directly into this. And I wanted to bring this up because I need feedback to this. So I was thinking about, what, how do I begin? So there's an intersection between philosophy, spirituality, and psychology, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes you find some ideas in one of these three areas which kind of is similar to the one in the other one, right?
Hmm.
So you have, like, for example, the Nietzschean idea of the Superman, which is like something that we strive to become. Then you have Sloterdijk's idea of a vertical tension, also like a directionality forward, which we orient ourselves now. And then
Hmm.
you go to psychology. Viktor Frankl, that with his logotherapy says basically the same. He says you can overcome every drama and crisis by having a goal in the future, by having a vision for the future. And in a kind of sense, these are all the same.
Mhm.
things. It's the same insight, but from different kind of areas. And so I was thinking, okay, what would an integral philosophy actually look like? And I don't mean like in the Wilberian sense. I was thinking about Sophemes. So I came up with the thing like a Sopheme, like not a
Mhm.
meme, but like a wisdom, Sophia, wisdom meme.
Oh,
So you
wisdom
have
meme. Interesting.
so it's
Okay.
like a
Mhm.
Sopheme, and a Sopheme is an information unit which is basically instructive about one aspect of our existence, like a Sprandel, defined by our biology, defined by the structure of the cosmos, defined by our way of thinking. And imagine that thing I described about, Frankl and Nietzsche. That would be a Sopheme, right? And so you can approach it from different angles. You can approach it from philosophy, you can approach it from spirituality, or from philosophy.
Mhm.
So you have different Sophemes, because there are ideas that are kind of um, reproducing themselves, and you can find them. You can find some forms of
In different
nihilism,
realms. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, that kind of always are kind of the same, but also different. And so, but these Sophemes are kind of defined by, our cognition, the way the cosmos is, and they're kind of eternal. You get what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
it's like a,
Mhm.
like a meme, but like a meme could be everything. With a Sopheme, I mean something that is eternal, that gives basic hints about the architecture of our whole existence. But it's still a Sprandel because it's defined by the architecture of cosmos and cognition.
Mhm. So that's pretty complex. It made me think of a few things.
Yeah.
One is that, we tend to look at things in isolation, right?
Hmm.
Or we tend to work on the things um, that we're best at, or that, that suit our archetypal nature or whatever. Like if you're a philosopher, then you're going to read philosophy. And, if you're more interested in, if you have a more practical mind, you're probably more interested in psychology. And if you're, let's say, an artist, you're really, into embodied expression.
Yeah.
But all of these things are dependent on each other on some way. Like they all need
Yeah.
each other. They can't exist in isolation. And
Exactly.
and and one thing I learned about the Gurdjieff work, he talks about the three brains. The mind, the heart, and the body, or mind, emotion, and movement, or the movement, motility. Those three brains. Um, one of the insights that Gurdjieff has, it's not, you don't work on the particular, you could, but what's really important is the relationship between them.
Yeah.
So it's the relationship between the two, between the different realms,
Yeah.
that makes the thing come alive.
Right.
That's which allows for circulation of the whole body of, you know for the of the whole body.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that maps onto your theory of Sophemes a little bit, because a Sopheme is something that is probably, it's wisdom that is in relationship to the, different parts, rather than the different parts themselves.
Right. And maybe we could even say that, these kinds of Sophemes exist only in relationship to themselves, because if there is a Sopheme which consists in the directionality, you know, like Sloterdijk or Nietzsche or Frankl, then
Mm-hmm.
there must be like a equivalent Sopheme which consists in basic in nihilism and says, or in relativism. So all these kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things map to each other, but they're not in the gross realm, let's say it spiritually. They're like encompassing in the subtle and causal realm, because they're kind of informing us and our way of thinking and our way of dealing with body and emotion and our way of
Mm-hmm.
engaging in the world, you know?
Yeah, and I guess they would be relevant in the sense to us in terms of their application rather than just in isolation, right?
Exactly.
So it might be that, the Superman idea or the aspirational idea, or the model idea is vitally important in one instance. And also, let's say, the flattening of that is important in another instance, or the deflation of that is important, because if you just get stuck on that, the model, then you are into
Mm.
inflationary thinking, as Jung called it, just like the Superman, and you go into this, sort of paradoxums of idealism and so it has to be balanced by everything needs to be kind of balanced by its opposite idea,
Exactly. Yeah,
which it
yeah,
was.
yeah.
So we don't want to be stuck in a plus or a minus all the time. We have to see that plus and minus are arising simultaneously.
Yeah, and I think we're given by our temperament, or maybe our temperament is defined by our uh, uh, how do inclination to certain Sophemes. There are some
Mm-hmm.
people who like, to strive towards the future. Informed are are informed by the need to drive into the future, where other people might be, more informed by other Sophemes. So
Yeah, and
I
that
don't I don't know. It's
that's
just this
often
weird.
related to masculine. I always put them in kind of. I always think of them in gender terms. Like there's a phallic impulse, which is always construct and conquer,
Yeah.
right? Conquer, construct, build, make, do. Which is just like right
Yeah,
ahead.
but no, but you know what my problem? My problem is these are kind of attributes that I don't wouldn't necessarily attribute to the Sopheme, because I think the general idea is not inflation or just doing. It's um it's orienting ourselves in the now by having a clear vision from the future. I think that's the common element of all these three kind of approaches. If you're just in the now without any view of the future, right, then the now looks obviously different, perfectly valid, obviously. But if you have a direction, like 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 a directionality in itself,
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah,
so the idea that a part of human existence is creating a relationship between future and now. There's a tension that is a metaxy, right? An in between, and
yeah,
so
got it. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna contrast that with the other sort of. It's also you could look at it in terms of the Promethean versus the Epimethean myth, right?
right.
Promethean is very much building for the, and then the Epimethean is living in the now or whatever. Uh, and then but again, I think you're right. There's a gap between those two things, and that's the what's the word you use? Spandrel. That's the
Randall.
thing. That's the spandrel is the gap between those things that we're never perfectly comfortable with this just constructive attitude. It becomes too much. It becomes like a big hard on, right?
Right.
And then we're also never just the now sort of nowness. Nowness becomes solipsistic, or it's like we need a project, or so I who was the I think it was the musician, I can't remember his name. Brian Eno, I think, had this idea of the long now,
Yeah.
which I kind of liked, because it's a nowness that stretches out.
Yeah. Yeah, but the problem obviously is that if you don't have goals or like a directionality, everybody behaves like a 16-year-old quasi-adolescent with too much libido, no direction, and everything seems like a big problem. I
Yeah.
mean, like as a we talked about this so much, so our human race doesn't really have a directionality. It's like, let's do that, and for that reason, very easy solvable problems like identity politics and sexual politics appear super big in our society, but in reality they're not, because like you could frame these problems and solve them if you would think in, let's say, 8 generations ahead, because then the framing is different. If you don't, it's like if you just look 1 generation ahead, then everything seems super big. But if
Oh
you
yeah,
think,
yeah.
and so if you think 8 generations ahead, then suddenly it's like, oh, that's a minor hiccup, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I guess this is why we're so apocalyptic in this moment, or why we have this sort of obsession with the end times, with this view that the world is ending, and
Right.
because we see all this, all these all these things happening, we interpret them as signs of the end, like forests
Yeah.
burning in Canada, and but there's always an ending. There's always a destructive aspect going on that's very intense, and yeah, I don't, yeah, like I guess. Well, this was what Jamie Wheel was talking to me. He says, "Look at the facts. Just check out the facts, and you see that, you know, species depletion, ocean depletion, forest depletion. All of this is sort of it's very, very, very apocalyptic.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the newness is always arising. So
Yeah, that would be, for example, that would be another Sopheme, the melancholia of the 18th century. The big, which is in Bina in the tarot. In the sadness, the big sadness, the universal sadness that all things come to an end. Goethe that says, everything that that comes alive, it's worth to be destroyed. That's not the proper translation, but the idea that everything comes to life, it's worth that it's being destroyed and that it's going to die. And so that is the opposite. That just this immense sadness that you can feel. It's a very feminine, because Bina is
Bina is
feminine.
the great mother, right? It's
Yeah, the great mother,
yeah.
but it's also Saturn. Saturn that kills their children. And so it's this unbearable sadness that whatever you do, it's going to die, everything. And so that is another theme. It's like a basic notion, a basic component of existence itself. And you need, and that's because Bina is over the abyss in the
Well, I
tree
was
of
just
life.
thinking like that the supernal triad is over the, it's beyond us, right? It's like, so that are you saying that the spandrel is, these are sort of, let's say, proto or meta, beyond beyond the whatever has been concretion, or whatever has become at least visible, or
No, I would say I probably could organize these Spandrels along the tree of life, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So, but, it's like in order to, well, I was just about to say, in order to actually deeply feel and embody that feeling of everything's coming to an end, you have to let go of your ego, go above the abyss in that tree of life, the second veil, and be the universe in its dying form, in its ever dying form, because that's Bina, and
Yeah.
that is a deep
But
deep.
Bina is birth and death too. I mean, it's the crushing birth of coming into the world through the womb and blood,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and it's also the destruction. So it's like the
Yeah.
goddess Kali, I think.
Right.
Whereas the the Shokma is just this, this male positivity, this just action, doing, expression, constant energy, like eternal energy, and then it gets crushed and formed in the chokma.
Yeah, it's the impulse before the form, no? Because the form appears below the abyss in the tree of
Mm-hmm.
life. It's the initial impulse without the space, because you need the space, like the womb, in order to fertilize it, and then comes the form. But chokma is the original form impulse without the form in spiritual terms,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes, 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 yes.
So, the idea was like to have an integral philosophy where you just map these different kinds of Sophemes, which appear in every philosophy, because they tell us something about how our existence is structured, and what kind of realities you can indulge in a kind of
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm. Well,
Anyhow,
that's interesting. Well, there could be major and minor Sophemes and things like that too. I mean, like the good thing about the tree of life is it's like there's 10 different, you know, attributes,
perspectives.
and they would appear to be contradicting each other, and sometimes 11 if you include Dath, but they appear to be contradicting each other, even though but they're a whole unity. So if we
Yeah,
look at the unity of the thing, then we can, and we don't get stuck in one or the other. Like, I think
right.
that when things are out of balance, then you have the extinction rally. People are sort of stuck in the maw of this terrible um chokma, bina chokma. I get them kind of mixed up. In whatever, they're stuck in the birth and death tunnel, and they're freaking out because they don't know that there's also this other side, that there's this new birth coming, or new arising, or new energy coming in the death of the old.
That's a Spandrel, for example, that you can only have one with the other. You
Yeah.
can't have one without the other. And I don't know where I would put that on the map of the tree of life, but it's like you can't have the far right politics without the left politics. It is
Hmm.
not possible. You can't have non-duality and chaos without form and structure. You can't have and form, and you can't have the one without. They're all informing each other. And where would you put that on the tree of life? Is that chesed, or where is that? The insight in these kinds of
Well,
dualities.
I guess dath means information, and you said inform. They're informing each other, so that
Yeah,
would
well,
be,
then it's that. Yeah, yeah, sure.
yeah.
That would be a Sopheme as well, because
Hmm.
that idea that everything informs each other, that informs systems theory, psychology, philosophy, spirituality, but this is like a basic tenet of existence itself,
Yeah.
you know. And so that's what I mean with the Sopheme. It's like you have to understand it and to embody it and understand it, and then you can apply it in different fields.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's different versions of the tree of life, or the Sphirot. The one I'm studying is saying there's two trees, and the one tree is the tree in the Garden of Eden, which is the attributes that just are untouched. There's nothing happening because they're already perfect. And
Yeah,
as soon as you add information, as soon as you add dath, right?
yeah,
Then this dynamic process, then you have the tree of knowledge, and then when the tree of knowledge comes into the picture, when there's knowledge, then maybe you have this dynamic process begins.
yeah.
So it looks like a sort of mythology, but you could really look at it as an algebra of some kind.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some interpretation where you have 400 tree of lives. So you have in every Sephirot, you have like a separate tree of life, characteristics of, how Chesed or Yesod comes about. And then you have the four worlds,
The four worlds, yeah.
Atzilut, Bria, Yetzia, Asiya, causal, subtle, non-dual, and gross. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have like 400 of those kind of architectures. Mm.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, the thing is, they're just models that you can sort of, they're models that give you a way of sort of viewing, let's say,
Yeah,
phenomenon, and how it arises and passes away, and the fact that there's these dynamic triads.
yeah,
So and the triads move from the very subtle and move into the world, the Malkuth, and they go from being you know no thing to having some sort of then to a more abstract form, and then into actuality. It's a
yeah,
fascinating kind of exploration. But I guess what's interesting again is this. I've thought a lot about the attributes, but I haven't thought about the in between the attributes,
yeah,
which and I've been thinking about that since this guy mentioned that was Gurdjieff's sort of methodology, is to work not on let's say the chakras or the whatever system you want to work, but work on the relationship between
Yeah,
the different energy fields
attractors or whatever. Yeah.
or attractors. Yeah.
Yeah, I also find interesting, like, in order to be at the Sopheme, you have to be, it has to be found in different areas, so it has to be, because then it's valid. If you find some basic information unit in psychology and you find it also in spirituality, religion, and philosophy, and maybe system theory, complexity, if you find it in all of these kind of things, then you can assume that there's a basic information that says something about the way we constructing the world and the world is constructed, right? And so, it's not just, and I like it because it's also like a justification of spirituality, because like in the end, spirituality is just one type of approach to Sophemes, like philosophy or like psychology. It's like they're all trying to find and orient themselves on the same thing, but they have different methodologies, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So
Anyhow,
yeah, I wonder
yeah.
if they're all trying to orient themselves on the same thing. I wonder if they have a different goal. Like philosophy has somewhat of a different goal than religion. I'm not sure. I think it thinks that it has the same goal, but I'm not sure if it really does.
Yeah, but does it? I mean, jnana yoga is a legitimate path of yoga.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, no doubt. But does it work on its own without the other ones? I don't know. I don't know if philosophy can work without its own deconstruction, or if let's say just deconstruction can work without philosophy, or I think all of these are depend, or or without art, or I think all these realms need each other. So that's kind of Gurdjieff's fourth way, right? It's not one or the other of the three.
Yeah.
It's not Jnana yoga as opposed to Bhakti yoga. It's true. We have an emphasis. Some people are more Bhakti yoga oriented. They're more devoted types, and other people are more intellectual.
Yeah.
More into just sort of analysis and deconstruction, and then other people are into work,
Yeah.
karma yoga. But I think all of the yogas are in a way it's an illusion to say they operate separately, because if you are into karma yoga, which is work, for example, you need to have some wisdom in your work, so you would need a bit of jnana yoga, and if you hello you know
Yeah.
so if you were and if you were very into if you're a devotional type, you just get completely stupid unless you study a bit of philosophy, and you become a noodle unless you do a little bit of work. So all these are like the fourth way makes the most sense to me because it
Yeah.
includes all of them.
Yeah. No, I see it exactly. You can't, if you get stuck in one of these areas, you can't, you don't get a full picture. You need, to be at that intersection between all these different areas in a kind
Yeah.
of sense. Mm.
And you become dogmatic about your own particular area,
Yeah.
uh, you
Yeah.
know, you think this is the way, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, because but again, I think like if because if philosophy tries to find out what is the way to wisdom, and what are the basic tenets of existence, and I mean, like, psychology also looks for, in a kind of way, in an applied way to these kinds of phenomena, and spirituality too, and this is like a kind of nice justification that lifts spirituality, from its murky new age characteristics of the 60s. There's a serious approach that reverberates through the centuries, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I very serious. Yeah. Yeah, this is one of the things I was speaking with Jamie Wheel about last night. Is he was kind of criticizing the subcultures and the fact, and these the California gurus that arise in these cultures,
Yeah.
and people trying to sort of do this sort of do it yourself spirituality, where you take a bunch of techniques from all kinds of different traditions, you mishmash them into, and you choose like one that you like and one that you don't like, and you kind of, it's like and then yeah, he was making a funny analysis of somebody who becomes a kind of a guru of some kind, and then is then and then makes a lot of money doing whatever his guru thing is,
Yeah.
and then that breaks down, and he starts to confess all of his sins, and then that becomes a new form of religion of confessing your
Yeah. Yeah.
sins,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
so there's this whole sort of, it's all a big trip, right, that the people think. So it's like, okay, like so and then I say, well, and then everybody and people have taken this phrase of Thich Nhat Hanh saying, the next Buddha is the Sangha, meaning there's no spiritual authority whatsoever, and we can just do it our own way, and
Yeah. Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
don't need leaders anymore, and so, but actually, you have to have the Buddha, the Dharma Sangha. You have to have some authority. You have to have a path. You have to have, because these things have been worked on for thousands of years, and you have to. I think in some ways, I'm a traditionalist, and that you have to work through a tradition. You can't just make up your own tradition. So
Yeah, there's a German
yeah,
sociologist that wrote extensively about this like a couple of years ago. He calls this phenomenon like to be a spiritual bohemian that like wanders through the marketplace of spiritual traditions and takes a little bit of this and takes a little bit of that and creates a complete mishmash out of some ideas from Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and then pretends there is some
there's a brand new revelation.
yeah. But this is, and he defines it as a postmodern way of spirituality, because that's what it was when Blavatsky and Crowley and Gurdjieff traveled all these different places and created that mishmash out of different cultures. Because like Blavatsky was the first one that traveled to the East and brought all these influences, and the same goes for Crowley. And so what happened was that, the 60s were so infused with different kind of things without any legitimate, authority kind of sorting that shit out. And I think that's the way, like a postmodern spirituality has to, the task that is postmodern spirituality has to solve, to bring some order to these kind of chaos.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess Zach calls that a crisis of teacherly authority, which is a big
Yeah.
thing because all the gurus became shamed, and scandals, and this whole kind of thing. And yeah, the other I was also talking with Luke, and Luke runs is helping me with this Gurdjieff group that we're starting, which is becoming more of a Gurdjieff group because this guy spent 20 years in the Gurdjieff movement. And he describes having been brought up as a Christian, with all the dogma, right? And then falling out of that because it was just dogma. It was just church going, It was just like you're supposed, but he couldn't, it was totally unembodied. And then he started doing the Gurdjieff work, and Gurdjieff work is just like bringing down things to basics, right? It's very much about, there's a whole complex esoteric thing that emerges from that, but the basic practice is self-remembrance, and it's extremely basic and embodied. And then that allowed him to sort of understand his Christianity again from a more basic embodied perspective. So he didn't have to throw out the Christianity, but doing the Gurdjieff work for 20 years allowed him to kind of like, not be just a church-going Christian, have a deeper kind of relationship to that. So I think that's like, that's this process of when, as they say in Zen, mountains and rivers are mountains and rivers, then they're not, and then they're mountains and rivers again, but they're embodied, where you've gone through that whole process. So, but if you're stuck in this land where mountains and rivers are not mountains and rivers, you're just stuck in an acid trip forever, right? Kind of like,
right.
I think a lot of people get lost in this sort of acid trip. The other thing I was saying to him is that I don't know if you've noticed this, but several people who I've talked to, smart people, interesting people, sometimes not, but have begun a conversation with I had, you know, I woke up, I had this awakening experience, and then they start to talk to you about that, like it's like, what kind of awakened master realized being would ever begin a sentence like
Yeah, yeah,
that?
yeah,
Like, I had
yeah,
this
yeah.
awakening experience, and then blah 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 blah, and now I know this and this and this and this. It's like people are bragging about their experiences on the
Right.
path, which is some kind of piège or some kind of trap for sure. And we were talking about that last night. I don't know. Have you had that experience? Have you met somebody who's
Of
just,
course,
announced to you that they've had this awakening experience?
most of them.
They always do that. Why do they do that? Like, what? For me, that's like, okay, there's something suspicious about this person. He hasn't actually had that experience. He's living in he might have had a big
No,
experience,
because he doesn't know
a peak
better.
experience, but he hasn't integrated it at all. If he had integrated it at all, then he would have had to work with somebody who was like, pushing him to go beyond his ego.
That's exactly the starting point of these Sophemes, because like if you imagine you would have like an integral philosophy that would show you the different kind of Sophemes, because I was thinking while you were talking, okay, so what is missing in this example is the realization of the meme of the Sopheme that wisdom always means restriction.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by
Yeah,
that?
well, I mean, it's like wisdom in the end means not to indulge yourself, eating too much drugs. It means always, wait a second before you talk. Talk less,
Mm-hmm.
act at the right moment, like retreat a little bit and wait for the right moment. What does wisdom mean? Wisdom mean in a certain sense, and you find that in every religion, in every spirituality, in psychology, it's like wisdom means, don't jump on that thing. Wait, be wise, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's like, why would you jump into a conversation by proclaiming that you had the very act that you proclaim that you have an awakening shows that you're not wise.
Shows that you're very unwise. Yeah, 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 yeah. You haven't added intelligence to whatever sublime experience you might have had, and you haven't allowed that to become embodied in the real world.
Yeah, and you don't know how to frame it because, I mean, as you say, there are different peak experiences, which are perfectly valid, but not every peak experience is the same. There are like Malkut and Yetzirah kind of peak experiences. And then
Mm-hmm.
there are the peak experiences like in Gevura and Bina, which are
And they're
completely
still like
different.
just experiences as well. They're
Right,
not enlightenment. They're just
right.
experiences. And any proper Zen teacher would sort of, if you have experiences, they put your head in a bucket of cold water, right? Just
Right.
don't get attached to the experiences,
Yeah.
because they're just experiences, and don't take them you know so seriously, because people are that's the other problem, is people are looking for experiences. That's not very wise either, I don't believe, to be in search of experiences.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think to be in search of wisdom, yes, but not to be in search of experience.
So I have a good example because like to earn some money, sometimes I'm doing some translation work. And so what I'm doing now is like doing this translation of a tarot, coincidentally. And it's a tarot
Mm-hmm.
about water. And the woman that is like the water tarot or whatever. And so the book is mostly about one experience, which is the baptism, but she doesn't know that. Because what does the baptism in Christianity mean? It means you're getting submerged under water, and then you're having a kind of all being connected kind of experience. The idea of the baptism is that you through water get touched by the Spirit of God whatsoever, and there's a cleansing moment also in this, so you got rid of your sins, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So but that's in my understanding, if you use Kabbalah, that's a kind of Yetzirah, Malkut. What's the next one? Malkut Yesod. That's like a moon, like a water moon
Yezod's
kind
in the center, isn't it? And then there's Hod. Oh no, Hod and Yezod, and yeah, yes,
above that. Heart of Chesed are above that. So
yeah.
first is the body, Malkut, and then are the realms of emotion and water. That's Chesed. And so what she describes is a basic, from the Hermetic order of the Golden Dawn kind of point of view, that's a classical Chesed kind of experience of what baptism really means, But because she doesn't know that, she inflates it as the whole map. And suddenly it's like, oh
Yeah.
no, we have. So it's like it's the same thing. She doesn't know where to put that kind of experience and think that's the whole thing.
Yeah,
That's
this comes
everything there
back.
is. Hmm?
Yeah, that's great. Well, we were talking about the patriarchy and the matriarchy, and people are saying like, oh, it's like, we're in a matriarchal time, and fuck the patriarchy and kill the patriarchy, and look at men, they're all bad, they rape and kill, they're terrible, and women are compassionate and good and kind, and all this sort
Yeah.
of thing. But what's never said is that the there's a complementarity between the two. So there is a fact that even though men have been violent, men are also protectors, and even though women are kind and often kinder than men and more compassionate, they're also castrate. They can also and they also need men. So we need each
Right.
other. And so if you get stuck on one sort of, if you get stuck on this idea that we're moving into this sort of feminine world, and that's what we should do, you're just going to create more division, duality, more broken. You're going to increase the let's say the pathology of both men and women when you split the
Yeah.
two and stick with just the one.
Yeah.
So that's like saying, oh yeah, let's go with Chokma instead of Bina, but that's ridiculous because they emerge as they're all part of the unity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And so it's like I would think like a meta map of Sophemes that would be immensely helpful, because then you would see, okay, this experience belongs to this experience belongs to this. What we're talking about now, all these kind of things belong together. That's also one Sopheme. And then you could
mhm.
orient yourselves in the landscape of attractor basins, where you can jump from one to another. And then you can understand what makes an experience valid.
Mhm.
It's like, because they're not, because these Sophemes are not diluted in a kind of way. They're like the core information.
Yeah.
Wisdom means restriction. All things belong together. We need a directionality. All these kinds of things that tell us something about the basic setup. And so, coming back to our original thought, so I think, the question is not if an AI is a replica of our mind, of our thinking. It's a question if the AI has the same Spandrels like we do. It's like hallucinating and like operating in the same kind of architecture that we are doing.
Right. Well, how could it not be, since it's modeled on our minds?
Right.
So yeah, that's interesting because, yeah, on the one hand it's modeled on us, and on the other hand it's not. It's clearly not us.
Yeah. But
So
it but
so
it
so
when
we
it
have
is
to understand that it's an extension, of our nervous system, and as Marshall McLuhan talks about technology being.
yeah.
But so it is part of us. But at the same time, we have to be extraordinarily clear that the AI bots are not human, and even if they start to really appear to be human, that they're only a simulacrum.
Yeah.
If we don't know the difference, and this is what I thought Zach had a good point here. He said designing AIs to imitate and look like humans,
Yeah.
that's the problem. They should be working in their own. They should be working as machines, and we should be very clear that these are machines and these are humans, and they're not the same thing.
Yeah, but my question that I'm posing is, what if, there are unintended consequences, and I don't mean this in a negative way, I mean this in a positive way, where we see suddenly from outside that the same Spandrels appear in AI like in our lives, like this kind of hallucinating, these kinds of things where, okay, so we never thought about these kinds of aspect of nature,
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So maybe it's like if you make a perfect, so if you create an AI, suddenly we know about who we are. It's like this thing. It's like, have you seen Unbreakable with Bruce Willis and
No.
Samuel L. Jackson? So the final thing is when you haven't seen that.
No.
Oh, it's an amazing movie. So, but there's Mr. Glass, and then there's like the superhero that doesn't know he's a superhero, and he only knows he's a superhero because Mr. Glass, who breaks at every instant because he has like glassy bones. He doesn't know also who he is, but he's looking for the superhero in order to understand who he is. And that's the last thing he says in the movie. Now that we know who you are, because he helps him to become a superhero, to realize his powers. Now that we know who you are, I know who I am. And there you have the thing again, that you have the one thing only because you have the other thing too. And so maybe the AI
and the
will
gap
help
between
us.
them.
Yeah, and maybe
the
the
spandrel
AI
between them.
Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Yeah, I'm just thinking about this idea that there's a gap between us and the AI machine, and even AI researchers were talking about the black box within the AI, and that's like they don't understand how it works. Like they created something that they don't quite understand. But everything is like that. We don't understand anything, fully. There's always a gap between our understanding. There's never a full understanding.
Sure.
So I was thinking if you were going to make this model of this model that you're talking about, you'd have to come from a place of complete enlightenment or understanding. If that is such a thing exists in order to create an accurate model. But then even that would be subject to change or a dynamic process.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is that is what religions are trying to do all the time, right? They're always trying to create these icons to try to describe things which can't be fully described. They're almost like what you're saying. These spandrels are almost like icons or something.
So these Sophemes,
they're like portals. Sophemes or are like portals. They're kind of like, like an icon in Orthodox senses. You pray for Jesus, but you also have the icons on your computers, which are portals into a different kind of program or realm, right?
Right. I mean,
so,
because like
I think religions create icons, and religions are creating Sophemes all the time. But the problem is that there's a continuity, and there's also a change going on.
If you look at there's in every religion you find the injunction, the imperative: don't attach yourself, don't be attached. Through attachment comes suffering.
Not in every religion.
Yeah, but in most of them.
Well, I say that Tantra inverses that and says through attachment comes liberation.
All right, good. But you find it at least in several major ones, this injunction.
Sutra.
Yeah, but it's a Sopheme still. That's what I'm saying. It appears everywhere.
Yeah.
And it is a portal. Do you know, do you know there's like a passus in Ezekiel in the Bible when it says you should devote yourself to the idol, or the idols should be devoted to you, of God. But the translation is unclear. It is not clear if it meant to be an idol or if it's meant to be a dildo, and I'm not making this shit up. So because the translation is not clear.
Or a phallus, a dildo?
It means that it sometimes used the image, the dildo, the idol, as a masturbatory thing that you stuff Jesus into your into your vagina. So that's the implication, because the translation is not clear. It's somewhere in Ezekiel. It's super interesting.
Well, yeah.
Let
Well,
me find it.
I've been thinking about because I talked to Mark Gaffney, and he talks about integrating the sparks of paganism in the Temple of Solomon, and this need.
Tuning
There's
fine gold and silver jewelry into gilded dildos.
gilded idols or gilded dildos.
Exactly, because but
Maybe they're
exactly.
gilded phalluses or something. Just
Yeah, but the implication is, and there are even movies about this. Benedetta, the recent one from the guy who made Basic Instinct. So it's about a nun who has like this very romantic relationships to God, and then she takes the cross, the little one that stands on her bedstand, and
Yeah.
makes a dildo out of that, and copulates with it. So that is not a weird idea. It's implicated in the Bible itself.
Yeah, yeah,
Just to
yeah.
gross everybody out at the end of this episode.
Yeah,
And
well, no, I just was making the point there's this illusory divide between paganism and monotheism,
yeah,
and that's sort of the cause of so much grief in culture is that they try to separate themselves out. So the monotheists try to make this perfect world of ethics and morality and reason and faith and all that, and then split off from the pagans, which is this world of just sensation and orgies and all kinds of sensual business and murder. And but I think the monotheism and I think part of the what they call tikkun olam is the reconstruction or whatever of the holy sparks is bringing together the pagan experience with the monotheistic experience, and that would create a
right,
whole system, whereas the systems are very fragmented right now because they're separate from each other. Whereas in the East, in Vajrayana, for example, which I practice, the pagan the non-pagan are integrated,
right.
so they don't make a big deal about sexuality
Yeah,
or experience, or they don't. It's not a two worlds mythology. Um,
right. Well,
so we could go on and on, could we?